Big news for anyone who loves the history of D-Day. Matt McLaughlin Battlefield Tours has just launched a brand new tour that visits the D-Day beaches and lots of other sites in rural France, and all from the comfort of a luxurious cruise on the Seine River. Now, we ran this tour in 2024 and it was a huge success. It sold out in a matter of weeks. So now we've rolled it out again for 2025. But this time, there'll be 3 departures in June, July and September, giving you 3 times the opportunity to join us. The cruise is on board the luxurious Amadeus Diamond and begins and ends in Paris. Over 8 days, you'll enjoy the history, scenery and culture of the beautiful Seine River. But as an exclusive offering just for our passengers, you'll enjoy 2 full days touring the D-Day landing beaches in both the US and British sectors, plus daily seminars on board the ship that unpack the history of D-Day. And like all our tours, you'll be hosted by one of our expert historians who'll bring the story of D-Day to life. And if you've been on one of our tours before, you'll know that our historians really are the best there is. This is an exclusive cruise and places are extremely limited. Visit battlefields.com.au to book your place today.
Bada, bada boom, sold.
Huh?
Just sold my car on Carvana. Dropping it off and getting paid today.
Already?
What, you still haven't sold yours? You told me about it months ago.
Is
the offer good?
Oh, the offer's great.
Don't have another car yet?
I could trade it in for this car I love.
Come on, what are we waiting for?
You're right.
Let's go.
Whether you're looking to sell your car right now or just whenever feels right, go to Carvana.com and sell your car the convenient way. Terms and conditions apply.
This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Fiscally responsible, financial geniuses, monetary magicians. These are things people say about drivers who switch their car insurance to Progressive and save hundreds. Visit Progressive.com to see if you could save. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Potential savings will vary. Not available in all states or situations.
A Living History production.
I'm Peter Hart.
And I'm Gary Bain.
And together we're Pete and Gary's Military History
Podcast. Hello and welcome to the podcast. I'm Gary Bain and once more I'm joined by Peter Hart, who has walked several miles to arrive here in a fine and sweaty condition.
Indeed, I am. And what's today, Gary? What are we doing?
Today, Pete, we're continuing in our mini-series on Jutland.
It's not a mini-series, Gary. It's a bloody saga.
What, like a holiday?
Yeah.
And today it's Battlecruiser action.
Ooh.
I have to say, this is a rip-roaring episode.
Is it?
Yeah, I've thoroughly enjoyed reading this.
Right. So set the scene. We've got all the shippy things are out there. What's happening?
Well, by 1330...
This is on the 31st of May.
Beatty had disposed his force so that the 2nd Battlecruiser Squadron lay some 2 miles to the northeast of the Lion and the 1st Battlecruiser Squadron a distance of, well, little tactical significance.
Bugger
really.
all.
However, the 5th Battle Squadron was stationed some 5 miles northwest of the line, and that is significant.
That is significant because he promised not to do that. However, perhaps the thing is that they'd been told, hadn't they? They'd been told by this telegram from the bloody Admiralty that Scheer wasn't out.
Yeah, it was very misleading. It all came about by some confusion when a Captain Jackson asked the wrong question of room 40. So he got an answer to his question, but they assumed that Scheer was safely ensconced in Wilhelmshaven, when in fact all that was there was his call sign.
Yeah,
he was very much at sea.
It's possible Beatty's the reason he's let them be so far behind is that he's thinking about the Turk, because the Grand Fleet's out as well, and they're going to have a rendezvous. And he's thinking about the junction with the Grand Fleet. He's thinking about that kind of thing. He's thinking about the fact the 5th Battle Squadron was going to rejoin the Grand Fleet, and the 3rd Battlecruiser Squadron, which had been at Scapa Flow improving their gunnery, which they needed to, would rejoin the Battlecruiser fleet. So, however you dress this up, it's a bit of a bloody error, isn't it?
Well, it's a grave error, I think, and it was it would have a significant impact on the course of the looming battle. Ahead of Beatty, to the east, was the screen provided by the 1st Light Cruiser Squadron, while the 2nd and 3rd Light Cruiser Squadrons covered the approaches from the south and southeast.
Now, 1358, they're nearing the designated rendezvous point, and Beatty signals the ships to be ready to make a turn at 14:15 to the northeast. That's to move towards a direct junction with the Grand Fleet. Now, hang on. What are the Germans doing?
Well, Hipper, who was German, was at this time pursuing a northerly course some 50 miles to the east of Beatty. And as their light cruiser screens were still some 16 miles apart, both admirals were in total ignorance of each other's presence at sea.
Yeah, Hipper's in charge of the first scouting group, the German battlecruisers. And who's in charge of the German high seas fleet, who are also at sea?
You've put me on the point. Admiral Scheer, I presume.
That's it. Good old Reinhard Scheer, your favourite, who seems to have been a distant relative of Blucher.
Oh, by his accent, you mean, yes. Now, at this moment in the epic drama that was about to unfold, an archetypal strolling player crossed the world stage.
How Shakespearean of you, Gary.
Well, but it's apt because it was a Danish tramp steamer.
Hamlet!
The NJ Fjord. Now, that chose this moment to pass midway between the outline scouts of both sides.
So you mean they'd have missed each other if it hadn't been for this ship?
Well, just before 1400, she was sighted by the German light cruiser Elbing of the 2nd Scouting Group, and as a matter of course, 2 destroyers were sent to investigate.
Yeah, so what are the British doing? Well, at 1410, the Galatea, the flagship of the 1st Light Cruiser Squadron, that's the most easterly ship of Beatty's screen, that also sights the NJ Fjord. And what do?
Well, they too moved to investigate, accompanied by the Phaeton.
Oh, I wanted you to say that.
As the outer margins of both screens converged on the hapless NJ Fjord, the Galatea was startled to sight the 2 German destroyers. Realisation soon dawned on both sides.
I'm going to do German now. Der Tag had finally dawned.
The day.
Yeah. So, what happens now?
Well, immediately, the Galatea started to pursue the destroyers. Commodore Alexander Sinclair, who had initially mistaken them for light cruisers, hoisted the signal flag, "Enemy in sight," at 14:18 and submitted a wireless sighting report.
1428, did we mention it was on the 31st of May? I can't remember. You did. Oh, phew. The Galatea opens fire, and so, it's after all those years, well, two and a half years, the battle's finally coming, isn't it? It's commencing.
As the German destroyers fell back on the 2nd Scouting Group, the Elbing returned fire at a range of about 14,000 yards and made her own contact report.
So both admirals, Scheer and Beatty, Scheer, Beatty, Hipper, everybody bloody knows. So the Galatea's wireless reports are picked up on the Iron Duke. And what does Jellicoe think? John Jellicoe, the commander of the Grand Fleet, think?
Well, he still believed that the High Seas Fleet was safely tucked up in harbour thanks to the earlier Admiralty signal.
Oh!
Nevertheless, he realised that something was afoot, and immediately ordered the Grand Fleet to raise steam ready to proceed at full speed.
Now, Beatty, he's on his northeasterly course, so he's heading towards Jellicoe. When he receives the message from the Galatea, he gets that about 1420. At 1432, he orders the flag signal to be hoisted for a general change of course to the south-southeast. Now, in doing this, you're probably not aware of this, Gary, but this causes one of the all-time greatest never-ending disputes in the entire history of the Royal Navy. What goes on? What happens? Why is this so controversial?
Well, the moment the signal was hoisted, the Lion turned to the new course accompanied by the 1st Battlecruiser Squadron and the 2nd Battlecruiser Squadron. At the same time, Beatty increased speed, and this is important, to 22 knots. Unfortunately, the 5th Battle Squadron failed to accompany the battlecruisers. So what's gone wrong?
Well, in essence, the Barham, that's the flagship of the 5th Battle Squadron, was too far away. It couldn't read the flag signal made by the Lion.
Wow. And the super dreadnoughts, they'd been zigzagging, controlled from the Lion, by signal flags which had been repeated for them by flashing searchlight from the Tiger.
Yeah, now, these flags, are they little tiny flags?
Well, they may have been large, but they couldn't easily be read at a distance of 5 miles.
5 miles is a long way. I'm just thinking, that's the distance between here and my ass.
Yeah, could I see something if you held it up in your window? Now, it's also vital to understand that they would have been only briefly displayed before being hauled down, which was the sign to execute the order.
That's the Royal Navy thing. You put it up and then you do it, whatever it says, when it's pulled down. Now, is there anything else that might be causing visibility problems?
Well, the dense smoke that poured from the battlecruisers as they simultaneously raised steam to accommodate the increase in speed.
I can see that just makes everything worse, or to use a posh word, exacerbate the difficulties of reading them at long range. But surely there was the searchlight signals from the Tiger.
Well, yeah, the Tiger actually confounds the problems by failing to repeat the signal by searchlight.
Now, in this now, who's the man on the bar that's in charge? Well, this is Vice Admiral Sir Hugh Evan Thomas. He's in charge of the 5th Battle Squadron. Now, what does he think's happening?
Well, he's naturally expecting the fresh signal to be a continuation of the pattern of course changes. Don't forget, they were zigzagging. They'd been following, and the Barham ordered the squadron to turn from their northeasterly course to the northwest at 1432.
A zigzag.
So he thinks they're just changing the zigzag. Now, the two elements of Beatty's force thus begin to head in opposite directions.
Does that, so the battlecruisers are going that way.
Yes.
And the others are going exactly the opposite course. And the battlecruisers have also raised speed. Now, what is the impact of that?
Well, as the battlecruisers raced off, each precious minute added immensely to the distance between themselves and the super dreadnoughts.
Why does that matter?
Well, they were supposed to ensure that Beatty wasn't outnumbered if caught by Shear and the first scouting group. This had rightly been seen as a serious failure in command and control by Beatty. And this is Vice Admiral Sir Hugh Evan Thomas aboard HMS Barham of the 5th Battle Squadron.
After all, isn't it one of the fundamental principles of naval tactics that an admiral makes sure that his orders are understood by distant parts of his fleet before rushing into space covered by a smoke screen? And you could see his point. There's other things making it more difficult for Evan Thomas. What?
Well, as a new arrival, he was unaware of the intricacies of the standing battlecruiser fleet orders, which warned that Beatty would not wait for acknowledgements from his subordinate admirals.
No. Yeah, I think you can go too far on this exculpating.
Yeah, because even Evan Thomas himself is not entirely free from blame in this calamity.
Why not?
Well, as the battlecruisers disappeared into the middle and then far distance, he was lamentably slow in taking any action himself.
How slow?
In fact, about 7 minutes passed before they swung onto the south-southeast course. And even then, it was only because the order was belatedly repeated to him by searchlight from the Lion.
Yeah, I think he's guilty of standing on little more than his bloody dignity and due ceremony here. I mean, he should have noticed something was up. Do you not think?
Well, surely it was obvious that the 1st and 2nd battlecruiser squadrons were no longer zigzagging in concert with his ships, and by failing to take the independent corrective action that was clearly within his power.
So he was guilty of what?
A egregious blunder. That's outstandingly bad or shocking. I looked it up.
I remember having to look that egregious up now. Are the consequences, they're serious, aren't they?
Well, what's happening? The original gap of 5 miles, which already separated Beatty from Evan Thomas, was overly large for proper close support.
Already? So before anything happened, it's too big.
Now, that gap had opened up to around 10 miles.
Now, 10 miles, that's from here to Edgware.
Yeah, people listening to this might not know any of that. It's 10 miles.
Perhaps best to have left it 10 miles.
Now, at 1435, the Galatea made another report. Urgent. Have sighted large amount of smoke as though from a fleet bearing east-northeast. Whoever was over the horizon, the battlecruisers would now have to meet them on their own.
Oh, Gary.
Dun, dun, dun.
Now, Hipper, what's he doing? He doesn't know who he's facing, so he swings round in stages till at 15:10 he's steering a northwesterly course. So he's also in pursuit of, he's also charging towards Beatty in a sense. He's in hot pursuit of what he imagines to be his prey. Whoa.
As the British battlecruisers head off, eventually to be followed by the 5th Battle Squadron.
What are they doing?
Desperately engaged in cutting corners to try to diminish the gap, there was a lengthy period of calm before the storm that would engulf them.
Now, how can this be? Well, sighting reports that the light cruiser screens, that the British and Germans knew that the others' battle cruisers might be at sea, but the sea's a big place, and there was a good deal of sailing and waiting before they could actually see each other. We're talking miles and miles and miles and miles and miles and miles, aren't we?
Yes. Now, an attempt to carry out a seaplane
Ooh,
wrecking,
did that work?
By HMS Engadine failed, as the signalling arrangements broke down and any intelligence gained was lost.
Yeah, early days for aerial reconnaissance at sea, I'm afraid. Now, the fleets are closing in on each other, and one of the things about the sea is it, can you see both ways equally?
No, in this case, the visibility was favourable to Hipper, for it was considerably clearer looking west than it was east.
And this is just a thing about being at sea. It's a known phenomenon. It's different. Phenomenon. Da, 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 da.
Now, at 15:20, have you noticed how professional I'm being today? At 15:20, Hipper, from his flagship, the Lutzow, caught his first glimpse of the smoke of the approaching British battlecruisers, several minutes before he was sighted by his opposite number on the bridge of the Lion.
Now, at first, Hipper doesn't know which way the British battlecruisers are going. He doesn't know about their formation. He's not sure exactly who's there. So he just basically carries on sailing to clarify the situation. Though he does slow down to 23 knots while he's pondering on this. So what about the British? When do they bloody see these Germans?
Well, at around 15:25...
5 minutes difference then.
The first British sighting reports were made from the New Zealand and Princess Royal. Beatty finally sighted the German battlecruisers from the Lion at about 15:30 and immediately ordered his ships back onto an easterly course to close rapidly with the Germans, while at the same time placing himself squarely between Hipper and his base.
That's always the aim the British want, to get so that they're in between the Germans and homey-womey. Now, at this time, Hipper, he's seen who it is. He can see the 6 dark grey British battlecruisers. And he realises that the British are present in greater strength. And he realises, what else does he realise?
Well, he's in imminent danger of being cut off.
What does he do?
At 15:33, he recalled the light cruisers pursuing the Galatea and turned 16 points to starboard, in effect reversing his course right round to the southeast.
What's his cunning plan? He has got a cunning plan here.
Well, this would take him straight back towards the High Seas Fleet, and if Beatty followed, it would draw him straight into Shear's welcoming steel embrace.
Steel embrace?
Yes. Aboard the Derflinger...
You mean he'd blow him up?
Yes, aboard the Derflinger, von Haas...
Now, who's von Haas? You've been in before,
We've been in. He's Commander George von Haas of the SMS Derflinger, and he watched the approach of the British battlecruisers. The fantasy appeared to be unfolding before his eyes. He'd been dreaming about this.
Daydreaming about it, hadn't he? That was in the last podcast. So what does he say? And I think the listeners are going to enjoy this accent.
Suddenly, my periscope revealed some big ships, black monsters, 6 broad-beamed giants, steaming in 2 columns. They were still a long way off, but they showed up clearly on the horizon, and even at this great distance, they looked powerful and massive.
Now, on the British ships, they're also starting to see their arch rivals, and the word starts to pass about the ships, the fleet. Remember, most people on a ship can't see what's going on. They're below decks or in the turrets, but the crews are galvanised into action. And I'm going to tell you what Midshipman Gordon Eadie, who's on HMS New Zealand, says. At 3:30, just as we were sitting down to tea in the gun room, the snotty of the watch, that's midshipman, of the watch dashed in and informed us that the Galatea had sighted enemy ships and that we should be going into action stations in 10 minutes' time. Knowing that this might lead to anything, we made the best of that 10 minutes. Crikey. Oh, stowing away as much food as possible. They say a Britisher fights best on a full stomach. Then for the second time in my life, I heard the real action stations call sounded off on the bugle. This same call is used for practice, but preceded and ended by a long G. Today's call meant the real thing, and I'm sure it sent a joyful thrill through everybody and scattered us to our action stations, full of eagerness with a spice of Nelson's Peerage or Westminster Abbey spirit. I just had time to grab my Gives waistcoat from the sea chest and dash below. Wow. So he's quite excited by it.
He is, because this is the real thing. Fierce excitement and frenetic activity filled the air.
Now, what's the raison d'etre, would you say, Gary, of the battlecruisers and super dreadnoughts or dreadnoughts? What's their raison d'etre?
Well, I think you're referring to their main armament, which was the 12-inch, 13.5-inch and 15-inch gun turrets.
So not raisin pudding?
No. They were guided by a director system.
I'm looking forward to explaining this. I actually, in the hardback of the book, explained this completely wrong and somebody had to write in to correct it. Could you just explain to me the director system and everything involved in it, Gary?
In the gunnery control tops, high above the ship, were installed Dumaresque trigonometrical calculating machines. Now, I had a look at this. They were invented around 1902 by Lieutenant John Dumaresque. And in essence, it's an analogue computer which often worked with the Vickers range clock. And it's designed to work out the deflection and range that's required by the guns. Now, having given a full explanation, Pete.
So basically, the range, the bearing, the course and speed, various instruments would work that out, and that would be passed to this. Analog means mechanical?
Yes.
Yeah.
Now, as the battlecruisers sighted their enemies, the rangefinders and directors began their vital work. The first readings began to be charted in the transmitting stations deep in the bowels of the ships.
Why in the bowels?
Because that's where they were.
Well, because if they got hit, the ship would be helpless. So, yeah. Oh, it's so exciting. What's going to happen next?
Well, the precise directions for laying the big guns were transmitted to each of the main turrets. Now...
Yes, Gary?
They don't just fire, do they? To load the guns, the shells and cordite charges that propelled them with such devastating power out of the guns had to be brought up from the shell room and magazine directly underneath the turret gun house. And this is what Lieutenant John Hazelwood of HMS Tiger said.
The gun crews were closed up and eventually the order to load was passed. That meant the shells and the cartridges had to come up from the bottom of the ship where there were shell rooms and magazines. It was all mechanical, being hydraulic. They were brought up, the shell first, then the rammer operator pushed the shell into the gun, followed by 4 quarter charges of cordite. That's the explosive, isn't it? Yeah. We stayed in this position until the order to bring the guns to the ready was passed. When the guns were brought to the ready, you simply waited for the open fire. We were looking forward to a chance to have a crack at the enemy. We were keen. This was a day we'd been waiting for. Wow.
Der Tag.
Der Tag again.
Now, the Germans were both surprised and relieved that the British had not yet opened fire, for they were only too aware that the 13.5-inch guns of the 1st Battlecruiser Squadron had a far superior range of some 24,000 yards.
Compared to what?
Well, the German 11-inch and 12-inch guns could only manage between 19,000 and 21,000 yards at the maximum.
So that meant there's about 3,000 yards, 3 to 4,000 yards, yeah?
Yep, the difference in ranges marked a zone during which the British could hit the Germans without any prospect of return fire. This was a missed opportunity. And we'll take a short break.
So good, so good, so good.
Amazing deals on activewear for all the ways you move are at Nordstrom Rack stores now.
How did I not know Rack has Adidas?
Oh, I love these new Nikes.
I always score at Rack.
Stock up on new gear from the best brands in the game, starting at just $40. Great brands, great prices. That's why you Rack.
The holidays are all about sharing with family. Meals, couches, stories, grandma's secret pecan pie recipe. And now you can also share a cart with Instacart's Family Carts. Everyone can add what they want to one group cart from wherever they are, so you don't have to go from room to room to find out who wants cranberry sauce, or whether you should get mini marshmallows for the yams or collecting votes for sugar cookies versus shortbread. Just share a cart, and then share the meals and the moments. Download the Instacart app and get delivery in as fast as 30 minutes. Plus, enjoy free delivery on your first 3 orders. Service fees and terms apply.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. You know, one of the perks about having 4 kids that you know about is actually getting a direct line to the big man up north. And this year, he wants you to know the best gift that you can give someone is the gift of Mint Mobile's unlimited wireless for $15 a month. Now, you don't even need to wrap it. Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
$45 upfront payment required, equivalent to $15 per month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Taxes and fees extra. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes on unlimited. See mintmobile.com for details.
This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. You chose to hit play on this podcast today. Smart choice. Make another smart choice with Auto Quote Explorer to compare rates from multiple car insurance companies all at once. Try it at progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Not available in all states or situations. Prices vary based on how you buy.
There were a number of factors that prevented the British ships from opening fire earlier.
Perhaps they didn't want to hurt the Germans.
That may well have been the case, but I think foremost amongst them was that the British rangefinders were nowhere near as effective and considerably overestimated the range.
Now, this is another technical thing. It's all about the length of the thingy bobby
by the breadth of the what's-it
and the different ways of stereoscopic sausage and as you could tell, we have a complete grasp of this issue, don't we, Gary?
Yeah. Now, whatever it was, the British had lost part of the advantage given to them by their heavier main armament.
Well, the Germans themselves take the range and those Germans, they take the liberty of opening fire first at 1548. So that's 1548 on the 31st of May, 1916. Wow. So so you've got 6 battlecruisers versus 5. How does Admiral von Hipper dispose his fire?
Well, he orders his battlecruisers to distribute their fire from left to right as they steam to the south.
Right, okay. So what does that mean in effect?
Well, the Lutzow fired at Lion, Derflinger at Princess Royal, Seydlitz at Queen Mary, Moltke at Tiger, and the Von der Tann left the New Zealand in peace and fired at the Indefatigable.
Now, what does Beatty order his ships to do?
Well, his first 2 ships to fire at the leading German ships, so that's Lion and Princess Royal firing at the Lutzow, Queen Mary at Derflinger, Tiger at Seydlitz, New Zealand at Moltke, and Indefatigable at Von der Tann.
Wow. Now, so let's go and have a look at your favourite. In accordance with Hipper's instruction, Commander Georg von Hayes, a lovely chap, he's firing, therefore, he's firing at the Princess Royal. What does he say?
All was ready to open fire. The tension increased every second, but I could not yet give the first order to fire. I had to wait for the signal from the flagship. 15,000! As my last order rang out, there was a dull roar. I looked ahead. The Lutzow is firing her first salvo, and immediately the signal, "Open fire!" is hoisted. In the same second, I shout, "Salvos, fire!" And like thunder, our first salvo crashes out. The ships astern follow suit at once, and we see all around the enemy jets of fire and rolling clouds of smoke.
Wow, so you see the shells bursting around the British, yeah? And they're pretty close, aren't they? Then the British open fire, at last. Now, here's an account from Midshipman Anthony Coombe. He's on HMS Lion. And where is he? Where is he on the...
He's above the bridge, and he hears the momentous order to fire. And this is Midshipman Anthony Coombe of HMS Lion.
Almost immediately after the enemy had opened fire, the captain said, "Open fire!" to the foretop, and the gunnery lieutenant commander opened fire with 4 13.5-inch guns all at once. You could hear the firing bell in the transmission station ring, and the direction layer pressed a trigger, at which all the guns went off with a tremendous great crash. Then I set myself down at my voice pipes, trusting to luck that the foretop would be spared, because the foretop's up the mast, Gary, above the bridge. It's a pretty vulnerable place to be if you think about it.
All along the British line, the guns finally blazed out. The first German salvos screamed towards their targets. Although they too had overestimated the range, for the most part, they corrected the error and soon began straddling their targets.
That's a bad chance. That's shells either side. That usually means with gunnery that they're gonna
correct it so that you can hit in the middle.
So tell me what your hero, Commander Jorg von Hayes, or whatever it is, on the Derflinger says.
The second salvo crashed out. Again, it was over. Down 400! I ordered. The third and fourth salvos were also over, in spite of the fact that after the third I'd given the order. Down 800! Good God, Stakov! There's something wrong, I cursed. Down 800! It appeared later from the gunnery log that the midshipman had probably not understood the first down 800, or at any rate it had not been acted upon. This time, however, the down 800 was effective. The sixth salvo, fired at 5:52, straddled. 3 splashes over the target, 1 short. We had, meantime, reached the range of 11,900, as the elevation clock showed a rate of 200 closing and then 300 closing per minute. We had already been in action 4 minutes, and only now had we straddled our target. That wasn't a very cheering result. Our first rounds had been well over.
Yeah, that sort of contradicts what I said. But in fact, it is true that the Germans did get on much quicker than the British. The Derflinger has a special problem. I want to make it clear that any time in the German ones are also wrong, because the Germans are on a different time system. I think there's 2 hours difference or 1 hour difference. I'm never sure.
Whatever the German mistakes were, they, however, paled into insignificance compared to the massive, uncorrected overestimate of the range of the British rangefinders.
Yeah, they've got bad visibility conditions. They've got the smoke drifting across the fleet. It's just bloody awful. Where does this smoke come from?
Well, the problem with the smoke from the British destroyers was caused as they passed up the engaged side of the British battlecruisers in an attempt to regain their correct station in the screen.
Yeah, it's because it's all a surprise, so they're in the wrong place, and instead of going, they just go up there, so their smoke gets in the way. Now there's also another problem, and that's we've had the distribution of fire. What could go wrong with that? What could go wrong with that? After all, the distribution, it's quite simple, 6v5. What could go wrong?
As at the Battle of Dogger Bank, they'd managed to blunder in their distribution of fire. The orders had been made by signal flags, and once again, not all of the intended recipients had received their orders.
Oh!
So, whilst Lion and Princess Royal were concentrating on the Lutzow, as ordered, the Queen Mary, instead of taking on the second ship in the German line, the Derflinger, was firing at the third in line, the Seydlitz.
That means the Derflinger's undisturbed, and von Haas aboard the Derflinger realised he's getting a bit of a free ride here, doesn't he? And this is what he says.
What astonished me was that so far we had apparently not been hit once. Only quite rarely did a shot stray near us. I observed the gun turrets of our target more closely and established that she was not firing at us. She too was firing at our flagship. I observed the third enemy ship for a moment. By some mistake, we were being left out. I laughed grimly, and now I began to engage our enemy with complete calm, as at gun practice with continually increasing accuracy.
That was all because behind the Queen Mary, the Tiger also missed the gunnery distribution signal, and that was aiming at the Seydlitz instead of her opposite number, which she meant to be aiming at the Moltke. It's all going wrong.
Well, to compound that, the New Zealand was firing as intended by BT at the fourth in line. So she too was also firing at Moltke.
However, at the back of the line, the Indefatigable and Von der Tann, they're doing what everybody wants them to do. They're firing at each other. That's good. They're right. Now, So now, the Moltke was getting the undivided attention of both the Tiger and the New Zealand, but she's firing well, and she hits home hard. So what happens? She's firing at the Tiger, the Moltke. What happens?
At around 1554, a series of her shells crashed down on the Tiger, putting both Q and X turrets temporarily out of action and causing considerable damage elsewhere.
She's only got 11-inch shells. They're still big, aren't they?
Yeah, and they're still capable of causing the most dreadful wounds. Men were smashed by the explosive blast, maimed by the flying shards, burnt by the searing flames, or gassed by the noxious poisonous fumes.
Oh, it's a nasty business. The fight's growing in severity as the battlecruisers are continuing to converge on each other, and the range closes to 13,000 yards. Now, this is pretty close range. Battlecruisers don't have that much armour. So what happens?
In recognition of this, at 1555, Hipper ordered his ships to turn away to the southeast. A couple of minutes later, Beatty also ordered his ships to turn away from their south-southeast course, round by 2 points to the south.
So both sides are just turning slightly away from their enemies to open out the range a bit. So what's happening? How are the British doing now? Are we doing any better?
Well, in those opening minutes, the British rate of fire was increasing, but only the Queen Mary, widely considered the crack gunnery ship of the battlecruiser fleet, managed to score any hits, as she landed 2 shells in succession at 1555 and 1557 to leave her mark on the Seydlitz.
Now, this is important because the second 13.5-inch shell smashes home and knocks out the C turret, which was amidships on the Seydlitz. Now, this is remember what had happened at Dogger Bank. Remember, they brought in flash control modifications in response to a disastrous fire that took out 2 turrets. So what happens now this time?
The same ship.
The same ship, Gary. You're right. So what happens? Do these things work? What happens? And who are you going to be to tell us?
Well, this is Kapitan Sursay Moritz von Egedy of SMS Seydlitz.
Oh. I'm just thinking we're going to get a Blucher flavour here.
The gunnery central station deep down reported. No answer from C turret. Smoke and gas pouring out of the voice pipes from C turret. That sounded like the time at Dogger Bank. Then it had been C and D turrets. A shell had burst outside, making only a small hole, but a red-hot piece of steel had ignited a cartridge, the flash setting fire to 13,000 pounds of cordite. 190 men had been killed, and the 2 turrets had been put out of action. Afterwards, a thorough examination showed that everything had been done in accordance with the regulations. I told the gunnery officer, if we lose 190 men and almost the whole ship in accordance with regulations, then they are somehow wrong. Therefore, we made technical improvements and changed our methods of training as well as the regulations. This time, only 1 cartridge caught fire. The flash did not reach the magazines, and so we lost only 20 dead or severely burned, and only 1 turret was put out of action.
So still a blow, but it was managed. So it worked. They still weren't flash-proof, but it was better. It was controlled.
Well, the whole ship wasn't put in danger.
Yeah.
Now, meanwhile, Princess Royal was also beginning to suffer.
Ooh, what happened?
Just before 1600, she was hit by a series of shells from the Derflinger. Able seaman James Herford and several other gunners had been ordered to retire from their action stations on the 4-inch guns to take shelter in the lower deck flats. And this is what able seaman James Herford of HMS Princess Royal says.
There were quite a few sailors there, all dancing to mouth organ music. I said to the officer in charge, "The shells are dropping all around us, sir." "All right," he replied. "Get your respirator, there may be gas shells." That's not there. Then all of a sudden we got an armour-piercing liquid fire shell in the flat. This is the effect he's talking, not about the real thing. Everything was red hot. I fell to the deck. After a while I heard people moaning. Everything was in darkness, no lights. I came to and put my hands to my head and thought, I'm not dead. My head's still on. Then I was picked up by the first aid man. I could walk after a moment or two, and they took me to the sick bay. When I got to the sick bay, there seemed to be 150 dead and wounded. Worse than me, I thought. So I walked away and went to the mess deck. Later on, I blacked out. So he was clearly clearly badly damaged by that. But yeah, you'll notice they think gas shells, liquid fire shells. This is just what the shells are, the impact and the fumes. This is what causes this sort of phraseology.
The Derflinger's undisturbed target practice was ended after about 10 minutes as the Princess Royal at last began to return her fire.
So I now like to think of Von Hayes, and now he can watch the shells coming towards him. He'd also dreamed about that in his previous thing. So what does he say?
I again fixed the enemy turrets with my periscope and watched them carefully. I now saw that they were directly trained at us. I made a further discovery, which astonished me. With each salvo fired by the enemy, I was able to see distinctly 4 or 5 shells coming through the air. They looked like elongated black spots. Gradually they grew bigger, and then, crash! They were here. They exploded on striking the water or the ship with a terrific roar. After a bit, I could tell from watching the shells whether they would fall short or over, or whether they would do us the honour of a visit.
Honour of a visit. Silly old Von Hayes.
Now, for both sides, it was a wild, exhilarating, or in fact terrifying scene, with danger sidling towards them from seemingly every angle.
The rate of fire was increasing. At last, the Lion begins to get the range right. But then, at 1600, the Lutzow struck what could have been a decisive blow in the battle. What happened, Scary?
A 12-inch shell burst on the top of the left gun of Lion's Q turret.
So what does it do? What damage is suffered?
The blast peeled back the roof and front of the turret as if it was cardboard and killed or wounded
roof.
Most of the crew. Yeah, the roof of the turret crashed back onto the deck of the injured Lion. The now open-topped turret caught fire, and there was an obvious danger to the whole ship if the fire spread to the magazine. And this is Private Harry Willow's RMLI of HMS Lion.
A heavier explosion than usual occurred and dense smoke came down the trunk, stopping progress until we'd shipped our respirators. 2 men were brought up from the shell room. Both had been working in the gunhouse and were badly wounded. They were passed along the mess deck to their medical station. Standing by the magazine door, I heard the officer of the turret give the order, "Close magazine doors, Q turret out of action." The corporal and I closed the port magazine door and clipped it up. Well, the Royal Marine Light Infantry.
Yeah, the Q turret was manned by the Royal Marines under Major Francis Harvey. He was mortally wounded and had lost both of his legs, but in the last moments of his consciousness, he retained the presence of mind to issue crucial orders to flag the magazine. Harvey was awarded a posthumous Victoria Cross.
Yeah, there's some doubt as to which orders were acted upon to close the magazine, but I think the point is that he did issue orders and it was a very brave man, very brave action. So how's the Lion doing? Badly damaged, I'd have thought.
Yeah, for a moment she staggered out of the line to starboard, possibly exacerbated by a mistake in the handling of the ship. But as the battle raged, some miles behind...
Oh, hang on. I'm just beginning to remember something. Who am I remembering?
The 5th Battle Squadron, and they were desperately trying to catch up, although they were still steering east rather than heading south.
Oh, God. Can they engage the German battle?
Too far away to engage anything. Now, the pace of the main engagement between the battlecruisers remained frenetic.
Oh, now at the rear of the line, so that's the Indefatigable. She's in a rancorous single ship duel with her opposite number, the Von der Tann. Now, then something terrible happens, and this is terrible. At about 1600, it's all happening at 1600. Just before it, one of the signallers is ordered up aloft to clear the signal flags. What had happened to the signal flags?
Well, they'd become entangled around the mast of the ship as it manoeuvred in battle. And this is signaller C. Farmer aboard...
Charles, you mean?
I do mean Charles, actually. You're quite right. Aboard HMS Indefatigable. The message came up for someone to go aloft to clear the flags. I went up, took my sea boots off first, climbed out the foretop, went up the Jacob's ladder right to the very top. I unfurled the flag and I sat on the wireless yard looking around, naturally watching the firing.
God, think of how high up he is. Jolly Matelot. He's brave. Now, right. What happens? 1602, so just a minute or two later after he's gone up, a salvo from the Von der Tann crashes down onto the Indefatigable. Wow. Now, it gets confusing now. Accident or design, the Indefatigable shears out of line to starboard. And a few seconds later, what happens, Gary? What happens?
Well, she's hit by a second salvo, which provoked a huge explosion.
Now, Charlie Farmer, he liked to be called Charlie. Charles Farmer was still aloft, up there on the foretop, when this second batch of 11-inch shells struck. And he's within the eye of a storm almost, isn't he? And it's stupendous, it's stupefying, it's unbelievable, the explosion. There's pictures of it, we'll put them up. So what does Charles Farmer say?
There was a terrific explosion aboard the ship. The magazines went. I saw the guns go up in the air just like matchsticks. 12-inch guns they were. Bodies and everything. She was beginning to settle down. Within half a minute, the ship turned right over and she was gone. I was 180 foot up and I was thrown well clear of the ship. Otherwise, I would have been sucked under. I was practically unconscious, turning over really. At last, I came on top of the water.
Yeah, he managed to survive by clinging onto a piece of debris till he's picked up much later. Survivors, so I presume there's some more survivors, aren't there?
Yeah, there was just one other, Able Seaman Elliot, who had also been in the top.
Now, this is the point about naval warfare. If
you make this point a lot.
I do. Sorry, Gary.
No. It's a really good point.
You're quite safe on a ship until something goes wrong. And what happens when something goes wrong? It's almost instantaneous, and it's bad, isn't it?
The other 1,017 men serving aboard were all killed. The whole ship's company. Not wounded, not crippled, not got a blighty or mentally scarred, just dead.
Yeah. And it's so sudden. It must, if you're watching that kind of thing, I mean, other ships, you must bloody hell, that could happen to us. Anyway, that leaves 5 aside now. Well, it was 6, now there's 5. The firing does settle down. The British do take on the opposite numbers in the line properly.
Well, that's often easier said than done in the assorted confusions of a smoke-wreathed battle, Pete.
Oh, no.
Now, the initial problems encountered by the British in sorting out their fire distribution...
Is that serious?
Well, it had been an irritant and more symptomatic of a lack of professionalism within the battlecruiser fleet than a significant disturbance to the course of events.
So why were things going wrong for the British then? What is the real reason, in our view?
Well, what had proved more serious was the absence during the early stages of the action of the 5th Battle Squadron, left trailing behind and still heading east.
So they were firing at German light cruisers, but that's irrelevant to any, if you're being rational, any assessment of the course of the main battle. And they were firing at light cruisers while the Indefatigable was losing its single ship duel with the Moltke. Do you think it would have been different if the 5th Battle Squadron had been in close support?
Well, the Indefatigable might still have been lost, but it's reasonably certain that Hitler's battlecruisers would have suffered a much more severe pounding as the price for their success.
So we can't say that the Indefatigable wouldn't have been hit and blown up anyway. But what we can say is that they would have damaged the Germans a bloody sight more. They were also very good at gunnery, the 5th Battle Squadron, which will become apparent in future episodes. So, it's only at 1605, just shortly after the Indefatigable was gone, that the forgotten 5th Battle Squadron finally get in touch with the battlecruiser. And they open fire at extreme range. That's 25, 26, 27, 28,000. A lot of thousands. Is it 32,000? I've gone and forgotten that. So I do
extreme range.
Yeah.
A minute later.
So what happens? Who's firing at who there?
Well, the Barham and Valiant fired at the Moltke, while the Warspite and Malaya aimed at the Von der Tann.
Was that nice for the Von der Tann and the Moltke?
Well, the belated arrival of the British super dreadnoughts was a serious matter for the Von der Tann and the Moltke, for as battlecruisers, they'd not been designed to cope with the crushing impact of the huge 1,950-pound shells that almost immediately began falling around them.
That's roughly the same weight each shell as you, Gary.
Yeah, roughly.
Roughly.
Now, at 1618, the Van der Tann had no option but to switch her fire onto the Barham. Unsubdued by the unequal match, her general accuracy was still impressive.
Yeah, the Van der Tann's good at gunnery, isn't it? But it's an unequal duel, and the 5th Battle Squadron, their huge 15-inch shells began to really batter to buggery the Van der Tann.
Technical term?
At the rear of the German line. We've got to remember, the Van der Tann's right at the back. Moltke's just in front of it. The 5th Battle Squadron have come into the action, and Beatty returns to the attack. What does he order?
At 1609, he ordered Captain James Fairey, commanding the 13th Flotilla, to launch his destroyers into an attack on the German line.
And 3 minutes later, so that's 1612, he turns his battlecruisers 2 points back to the east. That puts him on a course of what, Gary? Go on, work it out, come on.
South-southeast. So he's now once more closing with the Germans. At the same time, Hipper turned 2 points to the west.
Oh, so they're converging again. In fact, they're rapidly converging. So the battle, it's ratcheting up to a new and awful crescendo. I can't explain, Mike.
So what happens then?
What happens now, Gary?
We'll have to wait and see.
Oh.
Cliffhanger.
Is that what that funny noise was?
Well, it's meant to be EastEnders.
Well, I thought it was brilliant.
I can't wait for the next one.
Well, I think we've always been interested, Jutland. If people would like to read more, they can find more, not in our book, I've forgotten the name of it, but in my book called Jutland, which came out when you were a little lad in short trousers, Gary. It's still available. It's cheap as chips. And it's called Jutland, Death in the Grey Wastes.
Yes. Cheers, Pete.
Cheers, Gary. Thanks for listening to the show.
Blah, blah, blah.
If you'd like to support us, you can now buy us a coffee. Visit www.buymeacoffee.com/PGMH.
Or visit www.blah.
And we'd be jolly grateful.
Cheers.
So good, so good, so good.
Amazing deals on activewear for all the ways you move are at Nordstrom Rack stores now.
How did I not know Rack has Adidas?
Oh, I love these new Nikes.
I always score at Rack.
Stock up on new gear from the best brands in the game, starting at just $40. Great brands, great prices. That's why you Rack.
Over the last 75 years, over 10,000 chemicals have been introduced to our food supply. Yet the EU only allows 300 food additives. But at Thrive Market, we bring our members the highest quality brands and restrict more than 1,000 ingredients found at conventional grocery stores. Making the switch is easy with our Healthy Swap scanner, which finds better versions of all your favorite pantry, snacking, and home essentials without the added junk, dyes, and fillers. Plus, it's all delivered straight to your door. So if you're looking to shop at a grocery store that actually cares about your health, go to thrivemarket.com/podcast and you'll get 30% off your first order and a free gift. This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever find yourself playing the budgeting game? Well, with the Name Your Price tool from Progressive, you can find options that fit your budget and potentially lower your bills. Try it at progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law. Not available in all states.
Thanks for listening. Follow us on Twitter and Facebook to learn more about each episode. And if you'd like to support the podcast, you have a couple of options. You can buy us a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/PGMH, or consider subscribing to the podcast for only £2 per month and get ad-free listening and bonus content. You can find links for both on our Facebook and Twitter accounts.
Sounds great, doesn't it?